Today's topic is the Billionaire Boys Club. It was back in the 1980s. There was an organization that was set up by Joe Hunt. He was a financial wizard, and he attracted a number of his buddies from Beverly Hills to join with him in the commodities exchange, selling luxurious vehicles. This Billionaires Boys Club was the talk of the town in Beverly Hills for a number of years, highly successful. However, it fell on hard times, and this Ponzi scheme started to unravel for Joe Hunt. So he had to find various investments that he could get into and make money fast in order to save this organization. So we're going to be talking about what he did, some illegal things, some murders that he was involved in order to save his company. However, as brilliant as Joe Hunt was, he did some of the stupidest things that eventually got him caught and prosecuted for murder. So let's get into the facts of the case against Joe Hunt. Well, what is our topic today? Billionaire Boys Club, better known as the Joe Hunt case. Well, we're going to be talking about Beverly Hills because people in Beverly Hills, they've made a lot of money, and they're always looking for someone to help them out investing that money so they can get a good return and continue to live the good life. Well, Joe Hunt comes along, and Dominic Dunn did a program on him, Power, Privilege, and Justice, and really laid out who Joe Hunt was. Well, he was, I guess you would consider a San Fernando Valley guy. He grew up in the San Fernando Valley. His true name was Joseph Kamansky, kind of a skinny guy. His father was what we call a storefront psychiatrist, and eventually his mother left the family. So he did very well in school, and then it came time for high school. The question was, where would he go to high school? And his father wanted him to go to a good high school. The most famous one is the Harvard Preparatory School, where the rich and famous children of Los Angeles go. It has quite a reputation, and it has quite an alumni that goes back. And some of the names you might recognize. These are people and families that went to the Harvard Prep. All these famous people and celebrities, movie stars, rich people. Well, he applied and he got in, and he did very well. And he met a lot of those rich kids, and that's going to become quite important in our story. Well, his education was after high school. He went to USC. Didn't graduate there, but he got a CPA. He was the youngest CPA in the state of California. Bright guy, and he knew finance. Very charismatic. People liked him. He was very polished. And he went back to Chicago, and he got a seat on the commodities exchange. And one of his friends, rich friends from Beverly Hills, the Carney family, they said, okay, why don't you take $5 million that we have and invest it for us? And he did. He took that $5 million and he invested it in various commodities. And it made $14 million. Wow. However, very quickly, Joe Hunt learned about what goes up also can come crashing down. And it did. And he lost all that $14 million. Wow. What did he learn about the commodities exchange? Well, quite a bit. And he returns to Los Angeles in 1982. Didn't have any money. He was totally broke. And he had to think about it. What had he learned from this experience? And it was kind of a new philosophy that he had, and it was called the paradox philosophy. Reality was circumstantial. You need to reorientate your perspective. And, bad can be good and good can be bad. So this was his new philosophy that he had. And he, rekindled those contacts with all those rich kids at the Harvard Preparatory High School. And he set up an investment club and talked to all of his classmates, hey, I'll get you a job here. And they liked it because it was easy work and the hours were very short. He didn't have to work a long time. And he liked to give titles. Everybody was a vice president of marketing or finance or a CEO of some type. And it was very social. It was a social group where they met a lot of the very attractive women of Beverly Hills. So, yes, it was very, very successful. The only thing that these members had to do was use their sports car as collateral, because all these kids, their parents had given them very nice Ferraris and Maseratis. And Joe realized that he could use those cars as collateral to make more money. So that was the Billionaire Boys Club. It started out the Bombay Bicycle Club back in Chicago. There was a bar, restaurant near the Commodities Exchange by that name, and he liked that name. And he took that name and he kind of shortened it to the BBC. But when he got back out to California, called it the Billionaire Boys Club. And it stuck. People liked the sound of that name. So he did investments. What type of investments? Well, back in 1983, there was a cyclotron machine that was being invented. And what it did is it took fine ore and it made it into powder. And it did it very, very quickly and efficiently. So he got together with the inventor and he got the rights to it. So it was just a matter of time before that was going to make, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. The other thing that he invested in was the importing of luxury cars. And it worked very well for all of his members of the BBC because they all had luxury cars for their family and they had sports cars. So they would get these cars from Europe, England, and bring them over to the United States and sell them at a big profit. Wow, that went well. Made a lot of money. And then he got back on the Commodities Exchange in Chicago. Now, he couldn't get on it because he had lost a lot of money there and they didn't want him back, but he could have his members of the Commodities Exchange, and they used their name and their money, and they started investing in commodities. And it made a lot of money. All of those businesses were highly, highly successful until things got a little tight. And he was trying to make it with the businesses, but just like that cyclotron, he needed, maybe a year of marketing and research before that was going to go on the market where they could make a profit. So he's running short on money. So he's trying to get more people in his organization. To pay the old members off, he had to have new members. And that's, what is it called? It's called a Ponzi scheme. And a Ponzi scheme, when it doesn't get any new money or new money coming in, it collapses. So now he has to find a way to bring in money. Now he met this gentleman, Ron Levine. He lived in Beverly Hills, and he was thought to be quite a wealthy individual, knew a lot of people, and he had made a lot of money. So Joe Hunt said, hey, I'll help you out on your investments. And Levine said, hey, that's fine. And he said, here's my account. Now you can invest it however you want. And Joe Hunt did. He took $5 million in that account, and he was able to build it all the way to $14 million. And Joe was going to get a percentage of that as far as like a finder's fee for making all that money. And that would be enough to save his Billionaire Boys Club. So things were going fine, and he was waiting for that commission. And he asked Ron Levine, hey, could you give me that commission that you owe me? And at that point, Ron Levine kind of laughed at him and said, hey, that was a joke. That was just a practical joke. I didn't have any money in that. He was counting on that money. Now he realized, how was he going to make it? He isn't going to get this money from Ron Levine. But he knew from working with Ron Levine that he had a number of Swiss bank accounts. And all he needed to do was to get Ron Levine to write a check on one of those Swiss bank accounts, and that would be enough to save, his BBC. So he had to come up with a plan, and he needed about $1.5 million to keep his business afloat. So he comes up with this plan with Ron Levine. He's going to set up a dinner meeting with him. He's going to bring food over to his house. He's thinking, okay, wait, he's going to expect his money to be paid back. If he gives me $1.5 million, on one of his Swiss bank accounts, he's going to want that money paid back. And he realized he wouldn't be able to pay it back. So now he realizes that plan is going to have to be modified, and that he's going to have to kill Ron Levine. So Joe was one of these people who didn't, leave anything to chance. He always made a list of everything that needed to be done. And this is the list that he had on the plan that he was going to use to get the money from Ron Levine and then to kill him. This is it. And what did he have on his list? Well, here, you can see. Tape the mouth, handcuffs, put gloves on, close blinds, kill the dog, get the alarm access code, on and on and on. Look how detailed that murder list was. So he, gets ready for it, and the date that it was picked to do it was June 6, 1984. And the reason for that, Joe knew that Ron Levine was going to be going to New York. And that would be the perfect time because everybody would think that Ron Levine is back in New York after he's been killed. So that was the perfect time, and he set it up. And he goes over on that date. It's in the late afternoon, and he goes over there. He's picked up all the food, goes to his house, goes in there, and they sit down and they have dinner. They're having a conversation about, okay, this is what we're going to do on investments and so forth. And what had been designed was that Joe Hunt was going to have a mafia hitman come in and threaten him. And he did. The hitman sneaks in this back door of Ron Levine's house, comes in, and then he takes a gun and sticks a gun at Joe's head and says, hey, you owe us $1.5 million. You give it to us or I'm going to kill you right now. And then Joe, turns, to Ron Levine, and he says, hey, can you help me out? Can you help me? This guy's going to kill me. Do you have $1.5 million? Can you write a check on that? And Ron Levine, okay. Takes him into his little office there. He gets a check out, fills it out. He fills in the name of the company, meaning the BBC, Nitrogen of North America, for $1.5 million by Ron Levine. So the check has been written on the Swiss bank account right there. You can see it. Everything has been taken care of. And if Joe Hunt would have just remained silent, but what he did was he asked the so-called hitman, who was really his security man for the BBC, is that enough? Is that enough? Because Joe knew that Ron Levine is going to be dead in about 15 minutes. So maybe we should get him to write another check on that Swiss bank account, maybe for a more amount. Well, when Ron Levine hears Joe Hunt talking to this so-called hitman about negotiating more money, he knew something was up. He realized he had been scammed. And they take Ron Levine into the bedroom, which is in the back area of the house, and this so-called hitman, PITTMAN, takes the gun and puts the gun right up against Ron Levine's head and tells him, stop crying, stop complaining. And then he just pulls the trigger and kills Ron Levine. And he falls right on the bed, his bed. So the dirty deed has been done, and now they've got to plant all the evidence. So remember that list that Joe Hunt had made out? They were going to take all these papers and put them there as showing the authorization for this check for $1.5 million in the Swiss bank account. So everything has been filled out, and the papers have been stuffed in the desk there. Now the question is how to dispose of the body. Well, how are they going to get? It's dark by this time, and they're thinking, well, what are we going to do with the body? And they take the shower curtain down, and they wrap the body, Ron Levine's body, in the shower curtain. And when it's real quiet out, most likely about 11, maybe almost midnight, they take the body out this back door of Ron Levine's house, and they take it over to the car. And this is Joe Hunt's car. They open the trunk, and they place the body in there. Right there. That's the trunk that they placed Ron Levine's body in that shower curtain. And then they're ready to go. And he and the so-called hitman, PITTMAN, drive out to SOLEDAD Canyon. And they drive all the way out there, and it's dark out there. They have some shovels with them. And they take the body out of the back of the trunk, and they have a shotgun, and they blow his hands off. So, if anybody ever finds the body, they're not going to be able to identify the fingerprints. So after they blow him up, then they take lye, and they sprinkle lye on the body so it will decompose quickly. PITTMAN, the so-called hitman, then gets on a flight to fly to New York. Now they're trying to set up a diversion to make it look as though Ron Levine is in New York, that he's staying in a hotel there and using his credit card. So PITTMAN goes around, goes to this hotel, stays there, and uses this credit card. And it's the credit card of Ron Levine. It's a perfect setup. So they do that, but the hotel comes after PITTMAN as he's about to leave using the credit card. They said, wait, sir, come back here. What had happened was that account, that credit card, was overdrawn. There was no money on that credit card. So PITTMAN had to call up Joe Hunt and say, hey, this credit card isn't working. You're going to have to wire me some money. And so Joe Hunt wires money to PITTMAN, who's pretending to pay the hotel bill. So everything finally works out for them, and now he's got that Swiss check, and he's all set. It's for $1.5 million. That is going to pay all the expenses and the overdrafts that had been run up on the Billionaire Boys Club. And he takes it to the bank in downtown Los Angeles. He cashes it. He goes in, and then, whoa, what happens? The check bounced. And it came back. Ron Levine had only $49 in that Swiss bank account. Wow, what a disappointment. So I guess Ron Levine may have had the last laugh on Joe Hunt. Wow. Now, what is he going to do? It's desperation at its worst. By July of 1984, after killing Ron Levine and not being able to cash that check and get any money, what is he going to do? He's trying to get more members in his Billionaire Boys Club, and he comes up with a new member. He got a new recruit. He came on board, and that was his name, Ray Islamia. And he's the son of a very, very wealthy Iranian. And where did the money come from? Well, his father was a very close friend of the Shah of Iran. And when the Shah fell out of favor, he was able to escape with the Shah with all the money, huge amount of money. So his son knew that his father had a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars, and a lot of that was in Swiss bank accounts as well. So Joe talks to this new member and says, hey, Ray, can you help us out? Maybe you can get your father to write a check for us on one of his Swiss bank accounts. And the son said, yeah, I'm sure I can. And, let's go up and see him. His father was living up in the Bay Area near San Francisco. So what Joe Hunt and several of the members of the Billionaire Boys Club goes with this new member, Escalama, and they drive up to where he's staying in the San Jose area. And they need to get him, and they know it's going to be difficult. He most likely isn't going to be willing to write that check. So they go up there with this list that Joe has with rope, a spool of tape, handcuffs, gags, trunks, chloroform, all sorts of things. And Joe Hunt drives up there to the apartment, and he goes up there with a U-Haul truck, and they get the father, and they take the father and put him in this trunk. This is the trunk that he's locked up in, and then his body is put in this U-Haul truck that Joe is driving, and Joe drives it down the Grapevine, and it's very, very hot day, and it's so hot that and there's no air in the back of that U-Haul truck. The father, who's in that trunk, suffocates. He suffocates from lack of oxygen. He may have had a heart attack from being inside there, but we don't. He's not breathing. And when they get to the Grapevine, they notice he's not breathing, and they open the trunk, and he's dead. So what are they going to do? Well, Joe drives off to Soledad Canyon. You'd taken Ron Levine's body there, so why not take this Iranian father there? So they find a place to bury his body, and now they're going to have to, on their own, forge a check on that Swiss bank account for $1.5 million, and they do. They forge the signature of the father, and the son goes over to Switzerland to cash that check, and he does. He goes with another group. Joe Hunt does not go with him, but Escalante goes out there. There's very little money in that account, not $1.5 million, only maybe $1,000. Another shock to Joe Hunt. He was counting on that. Well, by now it's too late. The house of cards was collapsing on Joe's world. He couldn't come up with the money that he needed. At the same time, the Beverly Hills Police Department is doing an investigation on Ron Levine. He disappeared, and his parents have filed a report, a missing persons report. And so the detectives from the Beverly Hills Police Department go out to Ron Levine's house. The father lets him in through this back door, and they're looking around, and they find that there are certain documents there about a loan of $1.5 million on a Swiss bank account. And while they're out there, they find that to-do list. This to-do list that Joe Hunt had left by mistake in Ron Levine's house. It was on the desk there. He forgot to pick it up. Now, the detectives look at it and think, oh, this doesn't look good. It looks like something's going on. This doesn't look like a missing persons. This looks more like a homicide. So they have it dusted for prints, because maybe there's a fingerprint that they're able to lift off the back of that note. And what does it come back to? No one. They put that through all the database of all the people who had been arrested in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles. It doesn't come back to anybody. So that was very disappointing. Eventually, the Beverly Hills detective decided to call Joe Hunt in for questioning, because there were some questions, because his voice was on the telephone voice machine for Ron Levine. So Joe Hunt comes in. He's advised from Miranda rights, and he says, yeah, I'll talk to you. I'm more than happy to talk. They said, what do you know about Ron Levine? And they show him this list. And he says, I don't know what that is. I've never seen that before. And they said, oh, we'd like to roll your prints. And he says, fine. And they roll his prints. There's his fingerprints. They're taken, and they're handed to one of the technicians, who goes to another room and compares those fingerprints up with that fingerprint that's on the back of that to-do list. Voila! It matches. It matches. So now we know that to-do list was made out by Joe Hunt. His fingerprint is on the back of it. Now he's going to have to come up with an alibi. So Joe Hunt asks his very good friend, Jim Carney. He says, hey, Jim, and they're very close friends. And he said, could you give me an alibi? Give me an alibi. And Carney said, yeah, I'll do that. But what he really did, Carney then went to the Beverly Hills police and talked to the detectives there and said, hey, I can tell you what happened. Joe Hunt killed Ron Levine, and I can prove that. So now the police have something, and a case is going to be prosecuted. And it comes to my desk, and I had to be involved in the supervision of the Joe Hunt trial. And I had to make a decision as to whether we would go for the death penalty in his case. So I had to consider all the factors. Well, these would be the reasons why we shouldn't go for the death penalty. Maybe this would be sufficient. He didn't have a criminal record. Very bright guy, well educated. A lot of people highly recommended him. However, I kept thinking, can you think of a more premeditated murder than this? You have a to-do list to kill somebody. How methodical was it? And killing the dog. And it was all done for financial gain. There are times when you have to leave it up to the jury. Let them decide whether to impose the death penalty or whether life without the possibility of parole is sufficient. So I decided, let's go for it. And we were going to seek the death penalty in the Joe Hunt case. Now, it went to trial, and it was a lengthy trial, and there were a lot of witnesses who came testify, a lot of attention from all over the world. People were interested, maybe because of the name Billionaire Boys Club. And Joe Hunt, he was out on bail, and he would give interviews, and very, very convincing. The prosecution put on evidence by calling Carney, his friend, and he came in and just laid it all out, how Joe had explained how he and Pittman killed Ron Levine. And other members came in and testified as to the killing, and all this evidence was presented. And then Joe Hunt, the guy who always was so talkative, he didn't take the witness stand. He didn't say one word, and the defense totally relied on attacking Carney and the other members of the BBC. And the one thing, by not testifying, there was no way that Joe Hunt could explain to the jury why his fingerprint was on the back of that to-do list. So that was what happened as far as the defense. Now, what was the result of the trial? The jury came back, a first-degree murder. And they decided not to give him the death penalty, but give him life without the possibility of parole. So that is what happened to Joe Hunt. And, there's still a movement going on. Free Joe Hunt. This is him at the prison, like 40 years later. Now, there was another case that we had, and that was the San Jose murder case. Joe Hunt was not tried on that in Los Angeles, but was tried up in this Bay Area. And the jury came back hung. And later the case was dismissed as to Joe Hunt. That was killing the Iranian father. Now, as far as Pittman being involved in that case was dismissed against Pittman. Now, as to this other individual, he was convicted for taking part in it, but later the case was reversed, and he was allowed to plead to manslaughter, and by that time he had served the time on that. Now, the other was the son of the Iranian man who was killed. Now, his case, he was convicted, but the case was later reversed, and the case was dismissed. Now, as to Carney, he was involved in it, but he testified for the prosecution up there in the Bay Area. So how did it all come out as to each one of them? Well, Joe Hunt, he was free of that. Pittman was free of that one. And this one party, he did plead to manslaughter, but he was out of that. Now, as far as the son, Escalamari, he was free. And as we know, Carney wasn't prosecuted for it because he testified in the case. So no one really is in jail on the killing of the Iranian father. Now, as to Levine's place today, that's his house, still there, and that is the back area of it, where the body was taken out, put into the car. Soledad Canyon, what does it look like today? Well, we've taken Pittman up there to show us where the body was buried for both of them. And they've never been able to find either one of the bodies. Now, we found some lye spots where some lye was in the soil, but no bones. So that has never been found. Now, what has happened to the Joe Hunt case? Well, books have been written about it. Billionaire Boys Club is one of them. The Price of Experience is another. And there was a TV movie, and it was a miniseries, The Billionaire Boys Club. And who watched that? What was interesting, it was the Menendez brothers who watched that. Lyle and Eric, made mention that a lot of their ideas of killing their parents came from watching this mini-series of Joe Hunt and the Billionaire Boys Club. Well, what is going on the Levine sightings? Almost a year doesn't go by without, somebody claiming that they have seen Ron Levine somewhere. And some will say, we saw him in Greece. And then we'll have other people who come in and say, oh, I think I saw him on the streets of Beverly Hills. Or maybe it was downtown Los Angeles. We saw Ron Levine. So there's still sightings from Joe Hunt's friends who keep claiming that Ron Levine is still alive. All right. The big question is, how could these rich kids get involved in all these crimes? Well, there's no easy answer. And it may be just a sign of the times, what kids were like back then. But you had a lot of wealthy kids. They didn't really have a moral compass. And they wanted everything easy. Their attitude was, I'm too smart. They'll never catch me. So who knows why they do what they do. And you can decide, why are they the way they are? If you want more details on the Joe Hunt case, get my book, Rich Kid Killers of Beverly Hills. It also talks about the Menendez brothers. So get my book if you want to know all the details of the investigation as well as the trial. If you like this podcast, subscribe. That way you'll know when our next podcast comes out. Generally, we have one every Friday at 3 p.m. Hopefully you will join us again for another True Crime Files of Los Angeles, when we talk about another case from beginning to end. See you then.